stations there so like people can stay there?
At Take Back the Land, we're proponents of taking space. You take it out of need, right? We're self-determined as people, right? And there's some natural instincts, right? And we have a human right to a home. And if the government can't provide for us, then we should be self-determined. I'm fortunate enough to work a lot with the shack dwellers in South Africa. In post-apartheid South Africa, folks took plots of land and took garbage and created housing. And then the government started to oppress them and tear down the shacks. And they fought back, and they pushed back. And they ended up in the Constitutional Court in South Africa, and the Constitutional Court says you have the human right to housing. You can no longer tear down these shacks. And it was young people that were courageous and that got up. So I won't challenge anybody's thinking, but I can tell you my thinking, my orientation, being somebody who was formerly homeless, any place that's vacant, give me 50 soldiers in New York City and I'll get you a multi-story building. If you give me 50 soldiers that are willing to take the risk, right? Because with no risk, there's no reward, right? And the only way we've achieved social change in the past in this country is through direct action or civil disobedience. Intentionally breaking laws that are unjust, right? Just because it's a law doesn't mean it was written to work for you. So I'd be interested in hearing from the folks from Occupy Sandy about some of the struggles, particularly in Staten Island, and people, I'm seeing people living in a tent, and what types of conversations are happening at night in those spaces, and are people in a fit of rage? Because I think that's the only time people addressing issues, when they get into a fit of rage. So, anybody from Staten Island or been working in Staten Island?
No, go ahead. Somebody's going to go.
Yeah, I'm from Staten Island. Right now, no, I did some work with Occupy Sandy, but I'm a member of I'm with the Occupy Staten Island group. And we're interested in knowing, because we know that there's been, at least my friend told me that they've given a little more time before they throw out the people that are in the hotels. But I have to verify that. And I have a church that I'm involved with, and they're interested in knowing what's going to happen too. Because Bloomberg would not allow the FEMA trailers to come in. I mean, what are these people supposed to spend winter in a tent? I mean, the shelters are already filled. So I want to definitely find out more information as we go along.
Anybody else working in Staten Island?
Yeah, I was at what I call the bikers camp. I don't know if anybody has been there in Cedar Grove. So yesterday was very bad because of the storm. So the people that stayed there overnight, they didn't stay there. They came to a place in Brooklyn. It's what I think, and other people who are involved. It seems that it has been 3 months now. A lot of people are really very tired and really exhausted. And I only have time to volunteer one day a week, but I see people who are involved every day. They are tired, meaning that there's less time, less energy to really be angry, to have deeper political discussions, to analyze what's going on. And tonight there was supposed to be a community meeting, but the tent where it's supposed to happen was really badly damaged. So I was busy all day, so I didn't really check if it's happening tonight. But I really understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Within Occupy Sandy, any discussions about the political issues arising?
Well, my husband is involved. My guest Tom, I'm sure you've met him.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my husband. Yeah. There was a meeting last night.
Right.
Yeah, and he misses that aspect. I'm sure he's always trying to bring in more analytical stuff, but it is difficult.
It's a challenge, right? So people's lives are in peril at the same time you're trying to figure out how to correct it. So I totally get it. Anybody else working in Staten Island? And then I'd be interested to hear in Rockaway, because honestly, I haven't been out on the periphery.
Well, I was going to say, I just came back from Staten Island to Cedar Grove.
Yeah.
When we were there, like, I guess...
You were there today?
Yeah, I was just there.
How was
I
it
saw
today?
that they had the big tent where they had like the cooking and the TV.
Yeah.
They just put that up together and they
Oh,
put a
good.
floor there.
Good.
You know, so everything's on not on the ground really. It's on a floor, and they actually had a door to it.
Yeah.
But definitely, they say that they need people, but I think also they need
And then unfortunately,
better.
sorry.
Oh, sorry. I think they also could use some guidance on how to. Well, the two main people, I guess, that are running. One's really nice. The other one, I think that they could learn how to, work with guests and volunteers a little bit better. Because, like, I got there and I was like, okay, what just happened? You know what I mean? But, everybody else is really cool. You know what I mean? But it's just, I think, structure use, I guess, with communication and learning to work with people could be a little bit more
Yeah,
put
my
into
friend
it.
mentioned that too. She was affected by the storm, and she right away went into helping others. And she has Ocean Breeze Relief, Angel Relief, and she's doing her part, and that's what I really kind of focused in with her first before I, actually helped out. Anyway, she said the same thing. Their communication, she felt like, whoa. But she did say that she knows somebody that's working to try to get them more tents. So that's what I have right now.
Well, there are these little inner struggles, but
Right.
that's all over. That was with Occupy Wall Street also.
Well, I think a little bit could be the fact that sometimes maybe they don't have enough help there, but sometimes maybe there is a reason why there's not get enough help put there, because like friction, I guess, is just a little. But
You need a lot of humor. 3 days ago, they told me we need a lot of paper towels. Yesterday, I went with all these paper towels. We don't want them today. Go back. Bring them tomorrow.
But how do you break through that tension, right? Because, again, we just said people's lives are in the balance, right? So if people are having little spots, is that really productive? And, what's our long-term goal? What's our reason for being here or being in that particular space?
I think first we need to remind ourselves, either volunteers or people that are going through a lot, especially the victims, is learning to, for one, communicate, and two, just to realize that we're all here together. We're all here to help each other. Sometimes I think we need to kind of push our ego kind of back a little bit, and remember, this is, the only way this is actually going to work if we really, work together instead of trying to, have one person trying to tell people what to do, when it's supposed to be, a leader of leaders.
So I think, and this is opinion, right? I think one of the missteps of Occupy was not to create spaces for those types of dialogue, right? I think it's just not somebody having an idea or thinking this, right? Where are the spaces to have the dialogue and the conversation about why we're going through this tension, right? It's a process, right? And are spaces being created to do this? Honestly, I haven't been involved. A lot of the organizing I do is around the country and internationally. So I'd be real interested because folks are asking me to get involved. And, some of my critique of the Occupy movement was those spaces weren't created. But I didn't reserve those critiques for only Occupy at the same time when folks were trying to pull me into a black left unity circle to say, these white kids are taking spaces and doing what we did 50 years ago. Who do they think they are? Well, I had to say to them, you can't keep pulling the Band-Aid off the wound. You need to get in a space and talk about it together. You can't just keep opening up the door and throwing a bomb and then, seeing what happened. Then they throw one back at you. Fucking war. You're talking against that. So I'd be interested to hear how those spaces are being.
Like me being like a Latino, I was involved with Occupy since the very beginning. And where I'm from is like 80% Mexican city, so it's mostly Mexicans. Like when people say like these white kids, I was like, Like, you know, like go to Oakland and say that shit, or like, you know, go where I'm from and say that shit. It's like, you know, maybe up in New York. Well, because New York is already insanely segregated, you have like, I could understand where those dynamics came in. I went up into D.C., where that was very different. We had a lot of Black Panthers up in Occupy, but we also had two camps. We had Freedom Plaza and we had McPherson Square. Yeah, and it was really interesting to see that. And this was in the dead of winter too. Like, you know, I'm not hoping not to get off track on this, but like, I'm already a little twisted. I guess I got an idea to throw out instead. Like, so, you know, with the idea that we were out there in the winter when Occupy started, and okay, the dynamics, of course. Yeah, I wish like more black people gave it some time, some chance, because people up in like DC, like the black cats out there, man, I got nothing but respect for them. They had nothing but love, and they gave it time. Of course, there's a lot of white cats, but like, you know, they also understand, like, put your egos behind you and shit. So they're camping out in tents in Staten Island right now, the community.
I just know of Cedar.
That's the only one I think we have the
Cedar
only
Avenue,
camp.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
the only-
Cedar Grove.
Let's let some other folks.
Yeah, no, I stayed at the camp for like 2 weeks. There's only the one tent, but there's only like less than 10 people in the one tent. There's more tents in Staten Island, but that's for the community stuff that goes on, clothes, food. The tent I call the entertainment tent. And no residents that live on Staten Island actually stay in the tent. They're occupiers or related to Occupy. Everyone else that's been affected by the storm, it seems like they're staying with friends, they're staying with family. Some of them are staying in their homes. So, well, from the people that I met at Cedar Grove, I didn't meet any of them that were staying in shelters.
There are some. A lot of them. We at the intake center on Franklin Avenue in the Bronx, there were about 400 or 500 people on the floor, and they were supposed to bring in more women and children, but there was an issue with a couple of men who were trying to sneak upstairs past security. We were kept separate and not allowed to go on the main floor other than meal times, and even then they kept us completely separate. But there's still a handful of people here and there. It's not too common. You will find it in other shelters, though. Some people just kind of slip through and they end up sticking them in the shelter for some reason. I don't know. One day the politicians were around, the food was really good, and the cameras were there, and then everything kind of went back to normal when they sent everybody back up to the upstate to hotels and so forth. So I'm not hearing too much about it. I've done a little mutual aid out in Staten Island, but the commute's too far, and I really can't do the transportation right now. But I'm still trying to stay connected out there. But it's complicated. It's really complicated.
So I'm wondering if folks could go into Brooklyn and Rockaway a little bit, because this is good for me, because even being based here in New York, I'm getting educated right here, man. You know.
Of the people I've interviewed, I haven't seen, Bruno, maybe you can help me out here, but I haven't seen anybody that's even intense out there. It's like what he said, most people are either staying with friends or staying in their home. But I think the issue more for Rockaways is I've interviewed people that are being evicted because their house was so trashed and there's so much mold, and their landlord doesn't want to deal with it, so they just want to either sell it or demo it. So there's that kind of things happening where people are resisting being evicted. I've met one tenant rights person who actually got an eviction notice because she's just been a tenant rights activist and has not been, her house per se was not damaged because she's on the second floor, but a lot of her neighbors downstairs, their places were damaged, and rather than her landlord focusing on fixing their places, they weren't. They were fixing the empty places and then trying to turn those over so that new tenants would come in, and simultaneously raising everybody's rent by $200 to $300 to $400 because they didn't have flood insurance. So these are the stories I'm hearing from people. And from the Occupy side, I know there's been discussions about land grabbing, trailers and whatnot, but none of it's been publicized, and I don't want to say too much because of that. So.
So I didn't get to finish throwing out this idea. You know, a lot of people you don't want people sleeping out in the winter, like camping out in tents. This brings me the idea of yo, we I slept in the winter, you know, in DC, like frigid, cold, freezing, but we had donated the equipment that helped us out. We had space heaters and we had 2 military tents, as well as a lot of you know, Snuggie, space blankets, all kinds of other stuff. Now, just to throw out this idea, what about putting a call out for all the people who are homeless and I don't know, never mind. But I guess just throw out an idea, you know, let's have more occupations as we did last time. You know, build a community around mutual aid and donation, mostly around mutual aid. But I mean, it just made me think we did it last year, we could do it again. But if it was focused more on community, it would be a lot more stronger. But at the same time, it's also a little thing that needs to be have its own meeting of its own to really get fleshed out.
So the community idea, this is what this is about, right? Yeah. Community supporting community, and that speaks to values and sort of where I was leading down that road early on with the principal reduction, how it erodes the value system in this country. It's about me when I think about principal reduction, right? So how do we get people thinking about us, and how do we get, you know, I think, how do we answer that person? Do we defend those people being evicted? I mean, what type of organizing is going around on that? That's what my thinking is. You know, young lady here is from Brussels. I have a strong relationship with the European Squatters Collective and folks squatting in Berlin, and the answer is the space is vacant. We take it. You know, and you know, it seems like an easy answer to me, but you know, I also struggle and know people aren't at the same place. But I think the question becomes, how do we get people to that point? I mean, it seems the way to end homelessness, you're homeless because you don't have a home, right? And here's a vacant home, right? And so, you know, somebody play matchmaker, right? It's oversimplifying it, but how do we get to that point where people are thinking like that? I think that's a critical question.
There's definitely been discussion back down the road.
There's two sides to that. I lived in a warehouse where we actually paid rent for near 2 years. What got us by is that the laws changed in New York. Anyone knowingly renting a warehouse space to the landlord and the landlord knows that it's not residential, they have to bring the building up to code. So that's what stopped us from being evicted from that building. I know friends that lived in another part in Brooklyn called the Trailer Park, and the whole situation was just illegal. They was eventually pushed out. I mean, if you're looking for temporary solutions, then yeah. I mean, if the space is empty, kick in the door. But I think people that's really planning long-term things, they're thinking long-term. It's not so much, well, if we do this, we're going to do it right. And my issue with some of the homeowners, one here and there, people they're allowing volunteers to stay with them, but after the work is done, or after they can get out to volunteer, they're asking them to leave. Okay, well, thanks. I needed the help. And I mean, I don't think that's really fair, because I mean, I'm here because I'm able to help. I mean, not me personally, but people that I've heard in the situations, including myself. But it's not fair for me to come offer my help. I help you rip it down. I help you build it back up. And you're just going to move somebody else in because you're in such a financial situation that you need the money. But what about me now? I built this relationship with you, and now you're not even helping me go towards the next step. I can't even build this situation because I got to leave town because I don't have anywhere else to stay. So, yeah, it's a touchy situation.
So I'd be interested in seeing a raise of hands how many believe that housing is a human right. And so it seems like everybody. So I guess, to me, how many people believe that the government has the solution to house us? Yeah. But interestingly, nobody raised their hand. So we as a group don't believe that the government has the solution. So where should the solution come from?
I think it's more complicated than that. It's not that they don't have the solution; they rather not choose the solution.
Well, that's part of it. Political will is a big part of it.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that they know what's right, but they rather choose the option to feed their pockets rather than help people out that who is obviously in need. And the issue is that they try to push homeless people into one space or try to push them out of the state or whatever the case may be because it's not profitable for as in their eyes for anyone who is homeless, whether it's by disaster or whatever the case may be, to be within a particular area in the community. It doesn't. It's bad for commerce for them.
Which is what an NGO would buy a piece of land off the city, and then they'd own it, and then they could lease it to someone else who wants to develop it, right? And you get a 99-year lease, and you cannot. They have clauses that if you get an apartment, you can't sell it for profit. What's standing in it was called Bill 48, where they tried to get a census of all the properties in New York that are empty, the empty vacant lots and all the buildings. Because as you all know, you walk down through New York and you see buildings that have been empty 15, 20, 25 years. And they picture the homeless united with City University, and they did an initial census of all the boroughs. And what they found was there were more empty spaces than there were homeless people. And they've, tried to get this through the city council, but it's stalled. So now they're moving through community boards. Community Board 311, Bedford-Stuyvesant, South Bronx, and Harlem. East Harlem are very interested in this, and they're going to be spending the next year trying to grow that idea. And I've looked at it. It seems to me a really good idea. If anybody knows about Cooper Square, that's a community land trust, and you can have a 2-bedroom apartment for $100 because the issue becomes affordability. What stands in the way is this drive for gentrification and the way elections are run, because I'm in a shelter. I don't get food stamps, so I go see my local city councilor trying to say, why do I have to have a birth certificate to get food stamps when I already get them? What are you talking about, right? He doesn't want to talk to me. You know why? Because his money's coming from developers. And that's what the problem is. Housing is New York City's biggest problem. You have an increase in population every year. You have, this austerity drive from the right wing to cut us all down to size and steal everything we have. You've got Superstorm Sandy. You've got, there's just so many problems, and they're still not looking for solutions. And I'm just trying to get people on the page to learn about the community land trust idea, which has been very successful in a lot of places, but it's going to take a lot of political pressure and probably some very heavy direct action to get it going. But I think it's a better answer than squatting, where we're too apt to be picked off and targeted.
Thank you so much. It reminded me that yesterday at the conference we had up on Riverside Drive, that the Interfaith Assembly for Housing and Homelessness is pushing for a mayoral debate on the topic of homelessness, we do have a moment to try to make it, if there were a moment to make it as part of a mayoral agenda item, we should, this is the moment.
Were you at the meeting at the UFT?
Oh,
Were you at the meeting at the UFT?
Not this morning.
Okay, well, there's a group of 60 organizations, including the Coalition for the Homeless and the Cathedral and so on, all working on housing issues, and they're going to kick off a media campaign and then to get a mayoral forum. Yes. But the real issues of attacking the capitalist system, they don't want to do it. And you cannot fill these empty spaces unless you take that on, right? Because that's the issue we're fighting, is the profitability of sitting on empty property. And there being no penalty for it at all. They get tax breaks to sit on empty property when people are going homeless. To me, it's just completely inhumane. And that's why I keep coming back to Occupy, because at least I feel like I'm preaching to the converted. You know, these are human rights issues. So when the Soviet Union empire fell, nobody was homeless. The state owned the property. Nobody was in the street. What's going on here? The percentage of homelessness in New York just is exponential. And there's more to come with the foreclosures and more storms.
Yep.
There's a lot of money in it, keeping people stuck in programs they don't need and systems that are just not appropriate. Just sending people in and out of rehab and keeping them stuck in a stagnant system. It's not necessary at all. And they just leave you there to wait. I mean, my situation with my children, they've been in foster care for over a year now, and nobody, I have 6 social workers. Out of any of them, no one is helping me transition into an appropriate placement where I can have weekend visits with my kids or helping me in a step towards getting apartments. Out of all these caseworkers, one of them tells me to go apply for public assistance. She works for my attorney. And then my housing specialist, her only job is to help me submit a NYCHA application. And that's her only function. She can suggest to GHS to give me an appropriate placement, but it just doesn't happen. There's no cushion or any go-between. So, I mean, my situation is a little different, and I hope I'm a minority, but that's another business in and of itself. Please.
I know, like, when I was in Staten Island, like yesterday we stayed at a place where they own 3 stores, and I guess they have like this community where, like, if you work within the stores, like they have like a bookstore, furniture store, and cafe,
Everything goes.
Everything goes, you know. And to me, that's awesome, because like it's like in ways it's, you know, community. It brings the community, like a community together, and everybody that's working in community, you know, they have like a place to work, and plus at the same time, you know, they also have a place to stay. And it's like you know, I mean, that's to me that's something we could possibly kind of look at as an example, and figure out, okay, what can we do to get people work, but at the same time put that money into our own community, where we can be housing the people that we're putting to work. You know, like kind of use their concept of what they're doing, or maybe even talk with them and maybe work something out. Because like I know they take people in, and you know, I think they do like a trial, whatever. But I'm just trying to think of like how can we use that same concept with our own housing issues. Like if we can get to where like maybe we can get a store where it's us in the community that work in the store, and then we use that money to, you know, buy buildings or buy homes, and then we, you know, we house the people. You know, I mean, I think eventually it might grow bigger to where like the whole community is, you know, all the money that's being pushed in the stores is staying within our community. It's not going.
So we're gonna have to take a stat. So he's next, followed by him, and then you're next.
All right. Basically, I just wanted to mention another problem is where you know, she mentioned about people being kept within, you know, certain programs. We also have to remember that these programs are being privatized, and slowly but surely, a lot of the programs is going to be privatized by Chase, J.P. Morgan, you know, people like that. EBT has already been taken up by them. The thing is that we, like, you know, piggybacking on what he's saying, I think, you know, we have to push more. We have to make it, you know, known that it's urgent that we have to be more of a community, and, you know, go back into the old community at first, where, you know, somebody has a skill, right? We teach that skill to somebody else. Get somebody in the house, they have to learn a skill to, you know, maintain that house, build it back up. You raise that raise the property value or whatever. It doesn't really matter, but make it sustainable for yourself, for your family. And it boils down to not just community, but the skills as well.
So I kind of agree. There's a lot of issues, right? But we talked about values, and we seem to be a selfish society, so how do we get to that place?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The issue for me is partly with the people that we're helping to rebuild their homes. They just want to return to their life as it was before. They're not even thinking, well, how can I do something different? How can this change? How can I help someone else along the way? It's just like, oh yeah, thanks for the help. With Ghana's house, is my understanding of it, is they own all the property. So that's a different situation where they're really in control, and that whole concept or principle it was started with intent. I said it was started with intent. The Ghana's house. I haven't seen it face to face, but I've known people that lived there. So the whole thing was built with intention. So I mean, going forward, like what do we intend to do, or how do we intend to help people? And I mean, really, all these communities that we're helping to organize, other than thanks, I haven't really heard any feedback.
So, I mean, on the topic of Ghana's house, like, bringing back as well with privatization, not to mention competition, like from what comes out of a business like this, but really, that's what's happening in my hometown, what tried to happen. A lot of the community, all right, so where I live, it's a very Latino community, but a bunch of white people own the city, like the city board, and like, the mayor, all of them are white. The district, the people who control the districts, they're all white with the exception of one or two. And with it in mind, there's a guy named Paul Foster who is literally gentrifying the really Latin sides of like, the communities. And not gentrifying in like what you might think of, like, he's moving out the Latinos and he's putting in white people. No, he's just evicting them and keeping the lots empty. And they've been empty for 20 years. And we've tried to buy them back. And we've had the money, and he's just like, no, I just don't want to sell it to you. I don't want to sell it to you. It's not that we don't have the money. It's just, he's just like, no. Because he wants us to be in a very, not powerful position. So he can manipulate us in many ways. And I mean, just to think, just because we have the money, do you think they'll accept the offer? And that's where the Goannas is like, if they really want us to keep us there, so going back to like, we really had to push back. I think we had to step out of like the capitalist mind state and go for more that this is like an actual human right. I stand on that, and we have to like use these, like, we have to use, I don't want to say any means, but we have to look for like severe alternatives to what we're, our philosophy and values, and like, and education, and it has to be more in tune with the community, and that's why I was talking about, like, wherever the community is suffering, we stand by them in like severe resistance, and we built upon that. So I was thinking, like, for people who are working at Sheepshead Bay, Coney Island, like, we come and we have these meetings, but my big like disgruntled with this is like, how many of us here are actually from those communities? How many of us do we actually invite them? Like, yo, we're having this meeting that is extremely relevant to your community. Come on over and see what we're talking about, like us as radicals and trying to help you out. We need to reach out to these people. And it's not, I mean, we could invite them over here, but we could also have it in their communities where it's more accessible, because not everybody can make it all the way over here,
Okay. About like the free store and like community building from that level, I mean, not only do we have the feeding hub at Cedar Grove, there's the free store in the Tool Library, right up the street on Olympia Boulevard in Staten Island, and it's moving to the church across the street. There have been some issues there, but housing is a constitutional right, and these are things, I mean, you get back to very, very basic things, and going back to Occupy and claiming public spaces, and really mingling with those people and taking the land back literally. I mean, we got to keep it simple. This is a good place that we can do this, and go with these very communal ideas of sharing food and resources and rebuilding and making those local connections. I don't think people who are living in a half-molded house with no heat really want to truck it all the way out to near the Barclays Center to have a meeting. But I think keeping it local is a very, very big idea. But also, not to deter against the racism issue, because it's so definitely there. But I think it can sometimes distract away from the gender issue as well. And we can acknowledge these things, but if we don't set the model, because we know it's been a big problem in Occupy, sexism and male dominance has been a big issue from the beginning. And I've been at the homeless level for the past year, and I've experienced it at this very basic bottom level. I haven't been this armchair activist cruising around in nice people's apartments and hitting up the Mac and doing all that stuff. I've been struggling on a very basic level, and it's been hard, even harder down here, out on the street with everybody in these different areas. But there's a lot of love and a lot of people with good intentions. So I think that as far as housing is concerned, there's a lot that can be done. And we have the basic ideas, and people are willing to donate. Rich white people, even stupid people, there's everywhere just coming up and donating, pouring clothes and food and all sorts of stuff. It's just a matter of getting it organized. But it can definitely be done all along the coastline, Staten Island, everywhere. But keep it local is important.
No, let's speak first.
Yes, I notice everybody is sharing, and I don't understand. Are you here to find out what the problem is, or are you going to give any type of solutions? Because just sharing it helps, to share, but doesn't do anything more than that. And so what needs to happen is just sharing. You also need to give some type of solutions. And I think it was a very good solution to use Everything Goes as a way of looking at it. And if it means go to them and find out how they do it, and if it can be done, right? And if you have any type of connection with somebody else, just use that networking to get it done. And if there is, if there are buildings that aren't being occupied, find out if you can do it, and do it. Because you talked about going in and into a building and taking it over. So, I mean, how can it be done?
Kick down the door and move in.
Okay,
and bring 25 people who are willing to defend the space.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Squatting.
hang on. I realize that sounds easy, but people have to get to a place where they're fed up, where they're angry. Right? You have to get to a space when you say, that's it. I'm tired of laying down on the street while that's sitting there empty. I'm taking it. I'm taking it. I'm not sleeping in the snow anymore. I'm not letting the dog piss on me while I'm sleeping at night. I'm taking that shit. All right? And I'm getting worked up because this is where I got to. Right? I laid on the street of cardboard in Miami for 2.5 years. Then I came back here and had to sleep in a chair for 10 months every night. Got to here. I got a place to live, but I'm trying to bring people to the place where I was because I think, there is a simple solution. You're homeless because you don't have a home, right? Match homeless people with people as homes. Solution solved. There are 3 million homeless people in this country, 18 million vacant homes. Somebody play matchmaker. Problem is solved, right? So people have to get to a certain place. I'm sorry. People have to get to a certain place. People have to get angry. All of us are at different places. So the sharing of ideas sort of raises consciousness on people and talking through. Honestly, government hasn't had the solution, right? Government has failed us since for 300 years, right? Poverty has never been addressed in this country. We've been oppressed constantly. People of color have been oppressed constantly in this country, right? So I'm not going to a labor union and say, help me. I'm not going to the government for the solution. Everybody agreed here that housing is a human right, and everybody agreed that the solution has to come from the people. So when the people get in the space and...
Hey, I'm Justin. I just want to pass around some tape for name tags.
Okay.
I'm going to be the night greeter for the evening for the church. If you have any questions, let me know. I can help you find what you need. But put name tags on for us.
Okay.
That way we can know who's in the space and who's here for the summit. And then we'll have dinner in a little while.
So when people collectively get to a certain space, people take action. So I use the model of the shack dwellers in South Africa. They got to a place where they're not going to have their shacks torn down anymore. And they started marching to the streets and going into the capital in South Africa, in Johannesburg, and said, that's it.
That's what I want. I want to be able to say, okay, we're sitting here, right? And we're hearing that. So the next thing I want to do is, okay, tell us how to do it and find out how many people are willing to do it.
So I will, in the end, but I want other people to share in this circle. I will give you all the contact information you want. I'll just say this and I'll put this right out there. Take Back the Land as a movement that brings folks together collectively. We develop educational materials and how-to, and we call it open source. By that I mean it's for everybody, right? I will send you PowerPoint. They're over there on the computer. I didn't know what this was going to be, but I got them in my pocket, was ready to show. But I can share contact information with you, and we can have a deeper conversation somewhere else. But I want to bring some more voices into this conversation. Go ahead.
There was already a squatters movement in New York City in the early 70s, I believe. That was like before my time. Some of it was successful.
A big part of it was successful. I'll interrupt you. A group of 11 buildings were taken in 1979 and are still possessed by that same group today.
Other than that, I was just going to say, I don't think that kicking indoors, everybody's going to be able to palate that, especially if it's coming from Occupy and we're advocating kicking indoors. I don't think that's going to be.
I'm not advocating. I'm advocating people getting angry and then finding a solution. That's what I'm advocating.
Okay, a couple of things. You know, the commune that you're talking about, okay, on Staten Island, they were lucky enough, they bought buildings when real estate was still cheap. Things have changed tremendously. I came to New York in 1980. And, you know, they have some things that are very interesting, like the businesses they have, they don't care if there's a profit or not, which is, you know, I mean, that's very good. But there's also an ideology behind the commune that I'm not sure that everybody would like to, you know, to be involved with. So you have to be realistic about, you know, what's really behind the whole thing. You know, if you want to get involved, make sure that you know what is going on. And then another thing, I just want to bring this up, that I think being homeless, you know, there are millions of people homeless, which is true. But the homeless, you cannot just throw them on, you know, one heap. Every person has a different story, meaning that the solutions for every person, every family, are also, you know, different. And then going back to Sandy, if you go to the community that I know the best now on Staten Island, it is amazing how all these you know, they are all victims, but their realities are so different. First of all, it's the United Nations that lives down there. When I worked in the Free Store, you have people who don't, I mean, they don't speak barely, they don't speak English, some of them just a little bit. They come from all over the world. So you have, it's an incredibly layered community. You have the old-timers, you know, meaning people that lived in these little cottages that were, most of them were really damaged. White, elderly people, sometimes, you know, the old-time Italians, some heroin addicts, I mean, just a whole bunch of, you know, and then you have the day laborers that were sharing these old cottages, and then you have new immigrants, well educated, like, you know, the sons and daughters who came from Russian immigrants from Brighton Beach. So it's, and when you go there on a, like during the day, you know, there are people working, the ones that have the means, but there are others that will never ever be able to come back. Like last week I helped move, you know, with a couple of us were helping an elderly white lady move. Believe me, she lived on the second floor of a building. Her stuff was not damaged because of the storm, but the fact that Sandy happened was it's very good for her. She agreed. Her bill, I mean, it was like slum conditions. You couldn't imagine how she was living. And that's the reality of those, and that's the reality for Rockaway too. You know, you have newer people who have the means, and then basically, I mean, I shouldn't say this, but third world conditions. I mean, it's not fair for who lives in the third world, but so again, you know, we are faced with an incredible complex problem. And another, just the last thing, this was my neighborhood where we are now in 1980. Did anybody live here in 1980? Okay, so you know, now I got off at, you know, the G train. That when I moved here in 1980, I paid $235 for a one-bedroom apartment here on Clinton Street. There were very, 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 very few. There were just a couple of young, crazy white people then living here. The Jeep, the station here, it was a given. When you went there, as you were going to be robbed. So I never, ever, 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 ever took the train here. So for me, this is really quite something, you know.
Yeah.
And I see all these white people get off now. This is a completely different neighborhood now. But what I'm trying to get to is that I think a solution for homelessness is that we really have to work to have all kinds of incomes. You need a mix of people. That is the solution. For now, as long as there's capitalism, I'm all for, just get the whole thing over with, the whole capitalist system over. But mixed income, just rich, middle class, and the poorest. And when I walk around here, okay, I still see, the subsidized housing, but I also see that, you really need money now to live in this neighborhood.
It's called gentrification.
Yeah, and it's very, very, there's no way I could live here. No way. That's why we moved out. We bought something, a crummy house on Staten Island in '85.
The question comes then where all these, as gentrification happens, where do all these displaced people go?
Well,
that's the problem.
A lot of people left the city.
I get that, but I guess what I'm trying to get at and trying to answer some of the questions, and you saw, I got emotional a lot about it, right? So we've all agreed that government doesn't have the solution. The solution needs to come from us, right? And we need to figure out a way how to straighten out our own situation.
One thing I would say is, I think before we can even, start trying to get into something, where we can help, is I've just noticed, just in this conversation, how we've been bringing this race card up, and I think that's one of the things that we need to really work on, not seeing each other as race, but seeing each other as brothers and sisters, because I think that's really affecting, any communities. It's just I think the way we look at each other, it's we're looking at each other as, white, black, and that's why we tend to not want to work with each other. I think what we really need to do before we can even get anywhere is first, get away from what we were taught. We were all taught, black and white. It's not something you were born, it was something you were taught through time. And I think, I'm starting to see, even when I was in Occupy LA, people were more seeing brother and sisters. And I think, we need to get more pushed into that. And I think that's something that's going to have to start first. That's going to be one of the things, because this race thing, I grew up around, if you call them whites, I call them brothers, I call you a brother. I don't see you as black. I don't see you as Latino. I see you as my brother. I see you as my sister. And that's the way, and that's the way it needs to be. And that's the only way a community is going to have to work, because it just seems like all these labeling is just pushing us away from each other. Because, it's we don't want to work with each other because all we see is a label. It's some people may not be religious, but I always look at this concept, Jesus, when he came, he saw us as brothers and sisters, as his father saw us as sons and daughters. So, we got to get past this race.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just breaking us away from each other.
So let's slow down. We only have a couple of minutes left. And I'm going to, as facilitator, I'm going to take a shot to say, and I'm going to make this very concise, right? You can't just erase 300 years of racism. I am black, and certain people have done certain things to me, and it's been piled on for 300 years. It just doesn't go away. So conversations need to happen.
Yeah, I go ditto with women.
I agree.
It's a lot of women that end up homeless.
Folks, let's come back, right? So early on, there was a... need to open up space. It was my criticism of Occupy and conversations. And it needs to happen with Black Left Unity. It needs to happen everywhere. People need to open up space and have the conversation. It's painful, but we need to have it.
Exactly.
That's really interesting because I've been pushing the homelessness issue since Occupy since before October when it started in Zuccotti. And I still get the same issues, is that certain people who've never been homeless, I talk to them, I say, my name's the Occupy Homelessness. And they go, ha, 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 and then they glaze over. You know, they did this incredible report, you know, the Anti-Banking Committee, and everyone applauded it. Well, where was the Occupy position on homelessness? The only place I really saw really good Occupy organizing against homelessness was in Oakland and some places on the California coast. You know, instead it got, you know, moved into the foreclosure issue where people who had something were fighting to keep what they had. And the homeless have just been completely untriaged. And it's a discussion that absolutely has to take place because we are still looking at, you know, 10 times more foreclosures to come. You're looking at more climate damage to come. You're looking at more austerity to come and no affordable housing. And the only place I can see that we're going to get any uptake that's going to really be able to put the head, the heart, and the hands together is Occupy.
Just on the race issue, I mean, what you're saying is valid, and I've lived in a lot of places and experienced a lot of things, and I've been a minority in situations, and there's a lot of complexities wrapped up in that. But when people are struggling to come up with or create their own identity and find out what their history is, who tried to erase it, who lost it, and tried to recreate it and turn it into something. Oh, hold on. Just kind of, you gotta. White people need to do that. Just for a minute. Well, you know, it's a label. It is. You know, you got African American, and then in the corner down there is white. I mean, I'm like multicolored. You can see my circulatory system. So I'm all sorts of things. But don't begrudge anybody who's struggling to figure out their identity. I mean, no matter what age you are, you're still learning and taking in new experiences. So we're all coming from those backgrounds, and I think Occupy suffers from these things. We reflect the problems we're trying to combat against, but coming together at all and under this large umbrella of trying to pursue social justice, we're all a little more open-minded of that. So instead of being like critical and, oh, we should do this, oh, we should do that, all of us have to sit back and listen to stuff that we don't want to hear every once in a while. And it is a painful learning experience, but that conversation needs to happen. It hurts. And it's nasty, but it's good for all of us.
No,
It's good.
It needs to happen, but we shouldn't dwell
Right,
on it too
yeah.
much
Okay.
because you know it
Absolutely.
takes us away from.
Folks,
like,
I got
the
but I got some
sorry,
hands up,
sorry,
so I
sorry,
want to
sorry,
kind of
that's
go.
right.
Approach.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Say you can't erase someone's whole culture. You know, it's not that you eliminate how we view. Like you can't eliminate that he's black or you're white. You can't take that away because it's part of our identity. What we need to do is be more accepting of other cultures, be more open-minded, and not really diminish someone's character. I'm done. I'm sorry.
She's just saying basically that you can't erase, you know, what somebody is, the color, or what has happened to them in the past.
Okay, I'd like to address the race issue. It is an issue, right? But you know what? It's not the issue right about now. And the issue right about now is homelessness and being there and whatever the case may be. And we could all work together, regardless of our color and everything, as long as we work together. And the biggest thing that we need to deal with now is we work together and nobody gets a big head and say, okay, you listen, I'm Rob, I'm in charge, no, it's my way or no way, okay? So that's the biggest problem we have. We have to have unity and we have to work together for a common cause, right? And when we were talking about we could make a difference, right? We have to start making a difference with the powers that be right now. Like right now, NYCHA, that's New York
City
Housing Authority, right? They're trying to take some of the developments and trying to privatize them, okay? So there's already a problem with affordable housing, okay? And there's like 80,000 people trying to still get into public housing. I'm sorry, but that's how it is. And so they're also pushing people out. So there's going to be even more people who are going to need housing. So what we need to do with the system that exists right now is to stop something like that from happening, okay? Because they're trying to make affordable housing affordable for who? Affordable housing is for somebody who could make like $60,000 a year, right? That's affordable. But most people, and the lower level, and the poor people, and the indigenous people, and the low-income people, they're fortunate. They're fortunate if they can make $30,000 a year. So we need to take what we have and stop that from happening, as well as trying to get housing for everybody else. So, like, everybody needs to be aware of that. NYCHA is really trying to make money at the expense of everybody else, and it's going to, and they're trying to conquer and divide. You know, conquer like the middle class against the poor and whatever the case may be. And we need to stop that too. We need to work together because we're all in the same boat. You know, regardless of if I had a home and now I don't have a home, so now I want your help. But before that, I wasn't thinking about you. So you're in the same boat as a person who's homeless, who's living in a cardboard box, who's living in the projects or whatever the case may be. We need to work together, period. And that's what I'm saying. Work together to get you housing. Work together to sustain your housing. Work together to get that house or get that building changed over so more people could have a place to live.
Okay, folks, it's 7:10, so I got to kind of wrap it up. I'm going to make a closing statement. I'd love to hang around. I can hang around till about 7:30, but I have another event to go to. I just want to say, and on the public housing thing, and it sort of speaks to a lot of the conversation. Through Sandy, we saw no response from the governor, or not an adequate response. So I'm back to, again, that the solution has to come from the people directly affected. I'm going to go on record here, and I spent a lot of time doing this, saying the government has 13 housing subsidy programs that they're trying to put under one umbrella. And that umbrella is under one bill called Transformation Rental Assistance, and then it's been changed to something else. It was introduced by Keith Ellison, the first Muslim ever elected to Congress. In my opinion, sold out his people, right? Public housing was the only safety net for poor people in this country, and he was the one that submitted the bill. So that's problematic. It says to me government doesn't have the answer. The elected officials, the people we put in there, don't have the solutions. In New York City specific, there's a 10-year waiting list to get in public housing, that social safety net. There is a 12% vacancy rate in public housing because the government's money to public housing has been cut constantly since 1986. In 1986, the budget for public housing was $85 billion in this country. Today, it is $35 billion. That's problematic. That means there's no money to do capital improvements and buildings are falling down. But there are empty buildings up in there, and there are people that have skill sets in the city, right? So how do we come together collectively to find a solution to take care of our need, to realize, to actualize the human right to housing? I think we need to start thinking that way. We all believe that housing is a human right, all right? So how do we realize that when the government has signed off on treaties, but we can't actualize those treaties? Indigenous people in this country have been suffering for 200-300 years, but there are treaties that guarantee them those certain things, and they haven't received it yet. So it says to me it's going to take a movement of people from the ground, an upswell, all right? We have to get to a place where we're all angry, right? Where we've had enough. Everybody's at a different space. People always tell me people have to get to that place. I got there a long time ago. Sleeping in Miami, people think it's nice. It wasn't nice laying in that hot sun, dragging bags with 90-degree weather. Homelessness is a problem, and it's a problem that we're not addressing. We had a mayor in this city that had a bold plan in 2008 to say he's going to end homelessness in 5 years, when the rest of the mayors around the country said it's going to take 10 years. Homelessness has gone up. The numbers in shelters to this day is probably about 48,000. When he made that announcement, it was 35,000. This city spends $1 billion a year to warehouse people in shelters. That's not a solution. Shelters are temporary housing. You go in a shelter today, you're going to be stuck because there's no rental. We fulfill our needs, or how we exercise our need and our right to human housing. That's going to have to come collectively from the community. it sounds perfect that we get away from talking about color, race, gender, classism, but all that stuff exists, folks, and it's existed for a long time. It's painful. I'm repeating words, but it's going to have to be a conversation. We're going to have to get in spaces and talk about it, folks. We got to hash it out. It just doesn't go away. It's not Etch-a-Sketch where you pull up the page and it goes away. This is real and has been around for 300 years. I really appreciate this dialogue. It was rich. I appreciate everybody's input. I am Rob from Take Back the Land. You can email me at rob@takebacktheland.org. Rob, R-O-B, at takebacktheland.org. I will put my phone number and email address on a big piece of butcher paper. If folks want to have individual conversations about exercising your right of self-determination, I'll be more than happy to help you. I work with folks around the world, to do that, right? And I've learned from movements around the world who have exercised. I am so proud of the relationship that Take Back the Land has with the Western Cape Anti-Eviction Campaign in South Africa and the Abashali movement. People who took control of their lives and said, that's it, we figured it out, so.
Rob, I'm sorry to say this because it's very cynical and kind of like powerlessness, but where is the community, black or white? Where is the community fighting for their house? Does anybody come out and put pressure on the government, get out on demonstrations? I don't see anybody.
So we all have to look in the mirror and ask ourselves that question. It's about self-evaluation. When do you get to this level?
But where is everybody else?
You got to go knock on doors.
There's buildings that I was born in this neighborhood on the Upper East Side, 50 years, still they're vacant. Nobody does anything about it. There are a lot of buildings like that in Manhattan, prime real estate. Why is this? I mean, why aren't people protesting this? Even the rich living where the building is vacant right next door. I mean, when you come down to it, there's a big problem where we have to protest. This alone, that these buildings are here and nothing's being done. There's something that's stuck right there, and they're not doing anything about it. So that's right there, a big problem.
Can I just say this one thing? It's very, very difficult to organize homeless people. You have no self-esteem, you're demonized, your time is taken for granted. You're worried about if you're going to eat the next minute. You're not living in the same time frame as somebody who knows what solidity and stability is. And I think that we need to take that inside and hold it in ourselves when we're doing our work rather than saying, how come you're not here? The question is, what are we doing? Because you're screwed when you're homeless.
Yeah.
That is the worst place to be.
There's apathy, and there's apathy in the middle class and privileged populations. They're too busy. Some of them are marginalized, and they're struggling working 2 jobs just to maintain their own mortgage. So don't be critical of people who are already struggling more than most others. I mean,
I'm talking about who are living in rundown buildings. How many rent strikes do we hear about, right?
There's apathy. You can't look at the press for government programs and getting people to better themselves.
These people are too comfortable and they're too fearful to lose what they're comfortable about.
And if you live in no heat, that's too comfortable?
No, but just because somebody doesn't share your same emotion doesn't mean you should be foisting that on somebody else as if they should feel that way. People are where they're at.
They should be angry when they're living with no heat? When they're living with
NYCHA's evicting people for people from their apartment for not paying rent when they haven't made the repairs in the home. You don't have buildings. Right, they can pay somebody to go and give an eviction notice, but there's not a plumber or somebody to show up to fix their electric or their gas. But don't go yelling at that person living in that building.
I'm not yelling at that person. I live in a poor neighborhood myself, and there's very little heat. And when I talk to my neighbors about calling the city, they run from it.
Time out, folks. Time out.
Food is ready.
Okay, hang on.
Downstairs. So if people are hungry, dinner is downstairs. There's pretty flowers on the table and stuff, but you can continue the conversation if you want to. And
One quick statement, folks. When the Abashali movement in Manhattan and South Africa have a meeting like this, you're told to bring 50 people with you to the meeting. Because when you're about to be evicted, the Abashali office ain't going to protect you from eviction. It's the community that's going to protect you, right? Community supporting community, all right? A lot to learn from other movements around the world, man.